and the undivine. Okay. So you must have a clear idea of what is divine and what is undivine. On the one hand, we'll read the para and then we'll discuss it if necessary. I'm reading the para, okay? Each sentence. Are you ready, Archana ji?
Yes, yes, Rangada.
Okay, then we start. The universe is a manifestation of an infinite and eternal all existence. The divine being dwells in all that is, all that exists. We ourselves are that in ourselves, in our deepest being, our soul, our secret indwelling psychic entity is a portion of divine consciousness and essence. So, clear? The universe is a manifestation of an infinite and eternal all existence. Exactly like a poet and his poem. Whatever is there inside him, he brings it out. Okay. Or an artist. Whatever he is creating is already there in seed form in him and he is bringing it out. So the like the God has the universe within him in seed form and he brings it out. Manifestation. It is there and manifested, it becomes obvious to everybody, it becomes visible and manifest. The universe is a manifestation of what? Of an infinite and eternal all existence. Okay. The word existence is something that is real and exists. Then he is explaining further because he has put a colon. The divine being, which is the all existence, dwells in all that is, in everything that exists, in everything that exists, he is there. That, in other words, is the omnipresence of the divine. We ourselves, human beings, are that in ourself, in our deepest being. He is defining self. In our deepest being, our soul, our secret indwelling psychic entity. The psychic entity is secret, it is deep inside us. We don't see it very easily, that's why it is secret. But it is there. The secret indwelling psychic entity is a portion of the divine consciousness and essence. Note the word essence, okay? Not the details, but the real true core of whatever it is. That's the essence. This is the view we have taken of our existence. The others may not take it in this way at all. Okay? There are many philosophies which say man is not divine. Okay? So this is the view we have taken of our existence. But at the same time, we speak of a divine life as a culmination of an evolutionary process. And the use of the phrase implies that our present life is undivine and all the life too that is below us. Below us is the animal life, the vegetable life, and the inanimate life. I can use the word inanimate life also because matter contains life, but it is inanimate. That's all below us. So very, very imperfect. There is no consciousness there, or there is no development of consciousness. At the first glance, this looks like a self-contradiction. Instead of making a distinction between the divine life we aspire for and the present undivine existence, it would be more logical to speak of an ascent from level to higher level of a divine manifestation. So now he is saying that which seems a contradiction is not really a contradiction, it's a graded extension. At the rock bottom, there is the inconscience. And as evolution, like a staircase, or actually more like a ramp, okay? It's not a staircase, it's like a ramp. So slowly, slowly, as you go up the ramp, consciousness starts increasing, other things also start increasing, but mainly here he is discussing consciousness, at the higher level of divine manifestation. It may be admitted that essentially, if we look at the inner reality alone and discount the suggestions of the outer figure is the grossness, okay, the imperfection, all the things, negative things that we see in the physical world, discount them. Don't pay too much attention to them. Okay? The suggestions, and that also they are only suggestions, they are not realities. So he is making a distinction between the inner reality and the outer suggestions. So the outer is only suggestion, it's not even true. Very interesting word he is using. Right? Whereas very clearly he is saying inner reality and the outer suggestions.
Outer figure is there. not
Yeah,
suggestion.
suggestions of the outer figure. And figure also is an image. Okay? So it's essentially not the essential reality, it is not the outer figures. Your body, mind, life, or the universe that you see, physical universe. Such might be the nature of the evolution, the change we have to undergo in nature. So it would appear, perhaps through the impartial eye of a universal vision, untroubled by our dualities of knowledge and ignorance, good and evil, happiness and suffering, and participating in the untrammeled consciousness and delight of Satchidananda. So he's saying, we think of contradictions when we are in the lower, we are stuck in the outer figure, we are stuck in the suggestions of the outer figure. We don't see there is a contradiction. It's undivine. But he's saying it would appear perhaps to the impartial eye of a universal vision. In other words, when do you get the impartial eye of a universal vision? When you are out of your body, mind, life, when you are in the self. That time, impartial vision. Remember, all these words you equate with one another. Impartial means only a witness, no judgment at all. This is good, that is bad, this is this is that. You see differences, but you're not attaching any value to them. You're just seeing things what they are. Yes, this is black. Yes, this is white. But I don't give a gradation between them. I say this is good or that is bad. No. Impartial eye. And when does it come? Universal vision. Universal vision, the cosmic consciousness. Untroubled by our dualities of knowledge and ignorance. When we are in the identified with the body, mind, life, and we are subject to the suggestions of outer figure, okay, we are troubled by the dualities. They do bother us. Okay. Very easily we get bothered. The dualities of knowledge and ignorance, good and evil, happiness and suffering, and participating in the untrammeled consciousness and delight of Satchidananda. The impartial eye is untrammeled consciousness. Untrammeled, not netted. It is not stuck in a net. It is vast and it is not restricted, unconscious, and also delight of Satchidananda. So you have a vast consciousness and you also have a ananda. When you are in the impartial eye of a universal vision, which means a self. You have lost your identification, body, mind, life, then you see that there is a gradation from one level to another level. And yet, from the practical and relative point of view, which is our normal view, okay, as distinguished from the essential vision, the distinction between the divine and the undivine has an insistent value, a very pressing significance. This then is an aspect of the problem which it is necessary to bring into the light and assess its true importance. So very clear what he's saying. If you are in the identified with your body, mind, life, and you are stuck in the physical world and think that that is real, then you are subject to the dualities. You see good and bad, you see evil and good, all these things you see, and you are troubled. But if you rise to another level of consciousness, you are not troubled and you see the thing totally in a different way. You see that the divine is everywhere in a graded manner. He hides himself at the lowest and is openly visible at the highest. So this is what the difference between the two. We don't see because we are stuck in the lower. Okay, so he says,
That they have mentioned in the first line all existence.
yeah.
The first line is manifestation of.
I can't hear you clearly, Shilpa. I can't hear you clearly.
That is why in the first line they have mentioned the universe is the manifestation of an infinite and eternal all existence.
That's right.
In capital form.
Yeah. So all existence. You can take the word existence in a in many ways, okay? That which exists, okay? That reality, that is what exists. But you can also think of it as the subtlest of substance. Sri Aurobindo goes on repeating everywhere, he uses the word substance. God is not something abstract and something, it is really a substance, but very, very, very subtle substance. Okay? It is that with which the whole world is made. Okay? So all existence. So what was your question exactly, Shilpa?
We have to see all existence, infinite and eternal, he has written, so I have not been able to understand. The universe is a manifestation of an infinite and eternal all existence.
Yeah. So it is
Means-
eternal and infinite. Is not the universe infinite?
Huh.
Okay, and also it is eternal. It is
And
always
all
existed. Yeah.
all existence means his divine presence. That is all existence. It
Yeah,
means
that's right.
in everything.
Yeah, that's right. Everything. Right from the lowest to the highest. He is everything. That's what he's saying. Okay. But it's a graded one. You mustn't think that he is openly available in matter, openly available in life, in animals. No. He hides himself at the lower level, and as it goes on, uh, you go on mounting in consciousness, then he becomes more and more visible. But in the beginning, he is hidden. It's like a gradation of light.
Hmm.
Darkness and more, little more like a candlelight room. Then there is a slightly more light, like a daylight. Then finally, he says it is like a lightning light. Okay, so it's the image of light helps a lot.
So that is, we have to accept everything, thinking that there is a divine presence in everything.
That's right. But it is hidden at the lower level and it is openly available at the higher level. And there is a gradation between the two. Okay. So he's saying we have to.
Rangada, you have been muted by mistake. Please unmute yourself.
Rangada, we have not been able to hear you.
You have just to press the mic, Rangada. Just touch the mic. And you can unmute yourself by mistake.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Now it's okay. Now you can hear.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, Rangada. Sorry.
I don't know. Okay. All right. So I'm reading the next paragraph. Okay? The distinction between the divine and the undivine life is in fact identical with the root distinction between a life of knowledge lived in self-awareness and in the power of the light and a life of ignorance. At any rate, it so presents itself in a world that is slowly and with difficulty evolving out of an original inconscience. All life that has still this inconscience for its basis is stamped with the mark of a radical imperfection. For even if it is satisfied with its own type, it's a satisfaction with something incomplete and inharmonious. Okay? A patchwork of discords. On the contrary, even a purely mental life or vital life might be perfect within its limits if it were based on a restricted but harmonious self-power and self-knowledge. It is this bondage to a perpetual stamp of imperfection and disharmony that is the mark of the undivine. A divine life, on the contrary, even if progressing from the little to the more, would be at each stage harmonious in its principle and detail. It would be a secure ground upon which freedom and perfection could naturally flower or grow towards their highest stature, refine and expand into their most subtle opulence. all imperfections, all perfections have to be taken into view in our consideration of the difference between an undivine and a divine existence. But ordinarily, when we make the distinction, we do it as human beings struggling under the pressure of life and the difficulties of our conduct amidst its immediate problems and perplexities. Most of all, we are thinking of the distinction we are obliged to make between good and evil. That's a problem that is the most prominent among the dualities, good and evil, or of that, along with its kindred problem of the duality, the blend in us of happiness and suffering. Happiness and suffering is related to good and evil. Okay? Kindred problem. He's saying it is a related problem. When we seek intellectually for a divine presence in things, a divine origin of the world, a divine government of its workings, the presence of evil, the insistence on suffering, the large and enormous part offered to pain, grief, and affliction in the economy of nature are the cruel phenomena which baffle our reason and overcome the instinctive faith of mankind in such an origin and government, or in an all-seeing, all-determining, and omnipresent divine immanence. Other difficulties we could solve more easily and happily and make some shift to be better satisfied with the ready conclusiveness of our solutions. But this standard of judgment is not sufficiently comprehensive, and it is supported upon a too human point of view. For to a wider outlook, evil and suffering appear only as a striking aspect. They are not the whole defect, not even the root of the matter. The sum of the world's imperfections is not made up only of these two deficiencies. There is more than a fall, if fall there was, of our spiritual or material being from good and from happiness, or our nature's failure to overcome evil and suffering. Besides the deficiency of the ethical and hedonistic satisfactions demanded by our being, the paucity of good and delight in our world experience, there is also the deficiency of other divine degrees. Knowledge, truth, beauty, power, unity are, they too, the stuff and the elements of a divine life. And these are given to us in a scanty and grudging measure, yet are all in their absolute powers of the divine nature. So, he's saying when we think of divine and undivine, we'll go through each sentence, and sometimes his sentences are so long. But basically what he's saying here is that when we think of divine and undivine, the first thing that strikes us is the good and evil, cruelty and kindness. It should be there. Why should there be cruelty? Why has God created this cruelty? Okay? That's the first thing that strikes us. But Shri is saying that's not the only thing. And also its concomitant corollary, which is happiness and sorrow. Okay? Evil and good generate happiness and sorrow. Okay? So they are connected. That is the one that strikes us most. Everybody, when they think of that, they think of the so much of pain and suffering in the physical world. That's what you concentrate on most. That's the most prominent aspect. But Sri says that's not the only thing. There is also knowledge, there is also power. Okay? There are so many other things also which are there. Okay? Truth, beauty. Beauty also becomes more and more beautiful as you keep going up, less and less beautiful as you keep coming down. Power also, unity also. All these are elements of a divine life. So we have to look at all these things and not only suffering. Suffering and pain are only one particular aspect of this undivine and divine problem. That's what it says. So let's look at each sentence. Okay. Yeah. The distinction between the divine and the undivine life is in fact identical with the root distinction between the life of knowledge lived in the self-awareness and in the power of the light, self-awareness and in the power of light, and a life of ignorance. At any rate, it so presents itself in a world that is slowly and with difficulty evolving out of an original inconscience. When we think of divine and undivine, we think of when you are in knowledge and you have the power and the light is there, that is one thing. But when you look at the lower elements of life in the animal and the plant and all, there seems to be there is ignorance and there is lack of power and there is no knowledge there. Okay? So that's what he's saying. This is the thing that strikes us most, because it is starting from an original inconscience. All life that has still this inconscience for its basis is stamped with the mark of a radical imperfection. So just think of a room which is absolutely dark. Okay? Now, slowly, you are increasing the light there. First, you strike a matchstick. That darkness changes and a little bit of light comes into the picture. Then you put a candle light. A little more also light comes in. Then you use a 100-watt bulb. Even more light is coming in. Use a 500-watt bulb. Even more light comes in. But the darkness is still there. It's not total light. That's what he's mentioning here. Okay? So anything that when you are starting from the bottom, okay, there is always that element of the inconscience that is dragging its feet and not allowing you to go up entirely. Whatever you are beginning with continues to exist for a good deal of time. That's exactly what he's saying. It is always stamped. Okay? Look at the sentence carefully. All life that has still this inconscience for its basis. Okay? You are starting from inconscience, and however high you rise, the inconscience is always affecting you. It doesn't disappear entirely. It's like a glass of dirty water, and you go on pouring more and more pure water into it. The dirty water seems to become clearer and clearer, but the dirt is always there still, however less it be. Okay? That's what he's saying. So anything, however high you rise, you have to escape completely the inconscience. That's why he's saying the divine and undivine becomes very clear when you think of it. A stage where there is knowledge only and no ignorance, and the lower where there is total ignorance. So at any rate, it so presents itself to a world that is slowly and with difficulty evolving out of an original inconscience. All life that is still this inconscience for its basis is stamped with the mark of a radical imperfection. So that's why we go on stressing the gradation. Total darkness at the bottom, little more light, light. As you go up higher and higher, the light becomes absolutely 100%. So this is the gradation that he's talking about. And this gradation applies not only to knowledge and light, but it also applies to power, ananda, everything. Okay. So now he is saying something very interesting. You have to see now. He is saying all life that is still this inconscience for its basis is stamped with the mark of a radical imperfection. Note the word radical, the root. The root is the inconscience. So long as the root is not cut out, it will continue to pull you down. The roots are there. Okay? For even if it is satisfied with its own type, this is the interesting thing that he's saying now. But even if it is satisfied with its own type, it's a satisfaction with something incomplete and inharmonious. Okay? A patchwork of discords. Now, we'll discuss this a little bit. Mother says, if you look at the physical world, okay, we look at matter, the organization at its level seems to be perfect. Then she says, look at animal life, okay? It is perfect within itself. If you don't consider anything else, it is perfect within itself. It's exactly what it should be. Okay? Take the plant life also. At each level, it is perfect. But if you start comparing with something else and saying, oh, it could be better than this, there is a shortage here. And the comparison only will give you the shortage. If you don't compare with anything, it is perfect in itself. But the moment you compare with something else, the idea that it can better comes in. Okay? That's the thing. If you don't think of, if you look only at the animal life and not look above and below, if you don't look, it looks perfect. It's exactly as it should be. This is what mother also says. Okay? But when you compare with others, then you see a defect. So it is this. So based on where is it gone? Yeah, you are satisfied with the type. It's a satisfaction with something incomplete and inharmonious, a patchwork of discourse. On the contrary, even a purely mental or vital life might be perfect within its limits. There you are. Now this is very interesting because when there is a manifestation, when the supermind or the divine or Satchidananda is coming down in the involution, it creates levels of and planes of worlds which are perfect in themselves. Okay? The mental world is perfect in itself. The vital world is perfect in itself. The physical world also is perfect in itself, the subtle physical, as you coming down. But now you are starting from inconscience and there is a not involution but evolution. In the evolution, you are starting from the inconscience and therefore there is total imperfection. So there is a problem there. That's what he says. He explains also the origin of evil in this way. The perfect worlds are the subtle worlds which are in the involution, they are absolutely fine. Okay? Within themselves. But when you are starting in the evolution, it's like a ladder going down and a ladder going up. He says this in the life divine elsewhere. Okay? So when you are going up, you are starting from the lowest. Whereas on the other one in the involution, you are starting from the light. So there is no imperfection there. You are descending into limitations. Limitations are there, but not imperfection. You have to make a distinction between imperfection and limitation. Okay, so that's exactly what he's saying. On the contrary, even a purely mental or vital life might be perfect within its limits, without comparison, if it is based on a restricted but harmonious self-power and self-knowledge. It is this bondage to a perpetual stamp of imperfection and disharmony that is a mark of the undivine. When the disharmony comes in, there is undivine. On the, a divine life, on the contrary, even if progressing from the little to the more, would be at each stage harmonious in its principle and detail. Note the word little to the more, okay? From the small to the big. But small is not necessarily imperfect. But in when we are going up, there is imperfection. So, very clear the word, little and more. But if you say little is imperfect, then you are comparing, okay? So, the little to the more can be, little can be very pure, more can be more also pure. Would be at each stage harmonious in its principle and detail. It would be a secure ground upon which freedom and perfection could naturally flower or grow towards their highest stature, refine and expand into their most subtle opulence. The word opulence is interesting. Wealth, richness, okay? The variety. All imperfections, all perfections have to be taken into view in our consideration of the difference between an undivine and a divine existence. But ordinarily when we make the distinction, we do it as human beings struggling under the pressure of life and the difficulties of our conduct. When we are human, we have a mind, but there is life also in us. So there is a comparison. That's the whole problem. And the difficulties of our conduct amidst its immediate problems and perplexities. The immediate problems in the physical world are many. Where will I get my food? Where will I get my water? There's so many problems, immediate problems and perplexities. Most of all, we are thinking of the distinction we are obliged to make between good and evil. or of that, along with its kindred problem of the duality, the blendedness of happiness and suffering. So, when you think of divine and undivine, good and evil is the one that strikes us most, and its corollary, happiness and suffering. When we seek intellectually, okay, that means in a very impartial way, when we seek intellectually for a divine presence in things, a divine origin of the world, okay, a divine government of its workings, the presence of evil, the insistence on suffering, the large and enormous part play offered to pain, grief, and affliction in the economy of nature are the cruel phenomena which baffle our reason and overcome the instinctive faith of mankind in such an origin and government, or in an all-seeing, all-determining, and omnipresent divine immanence. When we think of the who has created the world, and you posit to yourself, it's a hypothesis that the divine has created the world. And the divine, but he is creating imperfection, he is creating suffering and pain and so then your faith starts wavering a little bit. That's what he's saying. Okay, so divine immanence. Other difficulties we could solve more easily and happily and make some shift to a better satisfied or a ready conclusiveness of our solution. He's saying that when we think of the pain and suffering, that's the most difficult to handle. But when we think of other things like knowledge or power, you can give explanations to yourself. He's saying other difficulties like knowledge and power, we could solve more easily and happily and make some shift to a better satisfied and with ready conclusiveness of our solution. But this standard of judgment is not sufficiently comprehensive, and it is supported upon a too human point of view. For a wider outlook, the one that is not restricted only to seeing suffering and pain. Okay? Evil and suffering appear only as a striking aspect. They are not the whole defect, not even the root of the matter. The sum of the world's imperfection is not made up only of these two deficiencies. There is more than the fall, if fall there was. Now, that's interesting because the fall is the Christian theory. No? Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit and they disobeyed the command and they had to fall. But Sri Aurobindo is saying if fall at all there was, because according to Sri Aurobindo, it's not a fall. The divine has come down on purpose. It's not a fall. That's why he's using the word. Certainly he puts in if fall there was. Okay. Actually, according to him, the manifestation is a willed limitation. That's the difference. That's why that's the significance of this little phrase, if fall there was, of our spiritual and material being, from good and from happiness, or our nature's failure to overcome evil and suffering. Besides the deficiency of the ethical and hedonistic satisfactions. The ethical satisfaction, good and evil. Hedonistic, happiness and suffering. Hedonism is the theory of happiness, okay? And ethical, you see what is good and what is bad. Good and evil. So, demanded by our being, the paucity is the rarity, the lack of good and delight in our world experience. There is also the deficiency of other divine degrees, which we don't think of so much. That's what he's saying. Knowledge, truth, beauty, power, unity are they too the stuff and elements of a divine life. And these are given to us in a scanty and grudging measure. Is it not true that we don't think much of beauty and knowledge? We think more practical things. No? So, unity we don't think at all. The problem doesn't even arise. Power to a certain extent. But they too are the stuff, but they are given to us in a scanty and grudging measure. The sense of beauty is not common at all in humanity. The sense of unity, the understanding of unity is even less. Okay, power. They too, the stuff and elements of a divine life, and these are given to us in a scanty and grudging measure. Yet, all are in their absolute powers of the divine nature. All these are also to be considered when we are considering the divine nature and the undivine nature. Knowledge, truth, beauty, power, and unity, and not only evil and good. That's what it is. Okay? So 8:25. So we have got 10 minutes. We can read one more para. Somebody has to read. Who will read?
Would you like me to read?
Yes, why not? Go ahead. It is not possible.
It is not possible then to limit the description of art and the world's undivine imperfection solely to moral evil or sensational suffering. There is more in the world enigma than their double problems, for they are only two strong results of a common principle. It is the general principle of imperfection that we have to admit and consider. If we look close at this general imperfection, we shall see that it consists first in a limitation in us of the divine elements which robs them of their divinity. Then in a various, many branching distortion, a perversion, a contrary turn, a falsifying departure from some ideal truth of being. To our minds, which do not possess that truth, but can conceive it, this departure presents itself either as a state from which we have lapsed spiritually, or as a possibility or promise which we cannot fulfill, cannot realize because it exists only as an idea. There has been either a lapse of inner spirit from a greater consciousness and knowledge, delight, love and beauty, power and capacity, harmony and good, or else there is a failure of our struggling nature, an impotence to achieve what we instinctively see to be divine and desirable. If we penetrate to the cause of the fall or the failure, we shall find that all proceeds from the one primal fact that our being, consciousness, force, experience of things represents not in their very self, but in their surface pragmatic nature, a principle or an effective phenomena of division or rupture in the unity of the divine existence. This division becomes, in its inevitable practical effect, a limitation of the divine consciousness and knowledge. The divine delight and beauty, the divine power and capacity, the divine harmony and good, there is a limitation of completeness and wholeness, a blindness in our vision of these things, a lameness in our following of them, in our experience of them, a fragmentation, a diminution of power and intensity, a lowering of quality, the mark of a descent from spiritual heights, or else of a consciousness emerging from the insensible neutral monotone of the unconscious. The intensities which are normal and natural on higher ranges are in us lost or toned down so as to harmonize with the blacks and grays of our material existence. There arises too, by a secondary ulterior effect, a perversion of these highest things. In our limited mentality, unconsciousness and wrong consciousness intervene. Ignorance covers our whole nature, and by the misapplication or misdirection of an imperfect will and knowledge, by automatic reaction of our diminished consciousness force and the inept poverty of our substance, contradictions of the divine elements are formed. Incapacity, inertia, falsehood, error, pain, and grief, wrongdoing, discord, evil. There is too always, somewhere hidden in ourselves, nursed in our recesses, even when not overtly felt in the conscious nature, even when rejected by parts of us which these things torture, an attachment to the experience of division, or clinging to the divided way of being, which prevents the excision of these unhappinesses or their rejection and removal. For since the principle of consciousness, force, and ananda is at the root of all manifestation, nothing can endure if it has not a will in our nature, a sanction of the Purusha, a sustained pleasure in some part of the being, even though it be a secret or a covert pleasure, to keep it in continuance.
Okay, a very interesting para, but very long para. So, what we'll do, we have got only 4 minutes. So, today I will just read out a summary of what he's saying and we will discuss it next time. Okay, so very interesting what he's saying. Now, okay, the undivine aspect of our world cannot be limited. This is my words. Huh? I have made a summary, I am reading out to you in short. Because sometimes when he goes into details, you get lost sometimes in the details. So this is an attempt at summarizing whatever is. Okay? The undivine aspect of our world, okay, cannot be limited to the only moral evil and suffering. Physical, sensational, vital and mental. Not only suffering and evil. Okay? Imperfection covers all other fields of life. So we have to think of imperfection in a much wider sense. And that imperfection includes not only good and evil, but also knowledge, delight, love, beauty, power, capacity, harmony and good. On a closer look, when we don't look very superficially but slightly more in a detailed manner, the reason for this general imperfection comes because of the limitation. So there's a limitation. The whole thing is based on limitation. That's why we use the word gradation of the divine qualities referred to above. But the limitation also introduces distortion and perversity. Now that's interesting. Okay? In the manifestation downwards, there can be only limitation. Okay? That's what happens actually in the involution. There are limitations only. But when we are starting from the other end, okay, there is distortion and perversity. Distortion is different from limitation. Limitation is less light, more light, okay? But distortion is that there are wrong, perverse actions. Okay? So distortion and perversity. Let us note that limitation alone need not be distorted or perverse. The contrary turn brings in falsehood. So when distortion comes in, falsehood comes in. The fall from the divine has now produced the undivine. So when we are coming down from limitation, there is also distortion and perversity. And that is what becomes the undivine element. That's what Mother means when she says that the physical world is perfect in itself, the animal world is perfect in itself. That's what it means. But when you compare and you see, then the question of divine and undivine comes in. There seems to be two reasons for the state of human degradation. First, the fall from the heights of ideal truth, beauty, power, consciousness. Second, there is a failure of man's part to rise again. It is due to incapacity. But is it only incapacity? That's what Swami is now discussing. It's a very interesting thing what he's saying. Okay. Looking further deeper down, we find that division is the primal cause of all imperfection. The one becoming the many is the problem. Okay. It's also essential for the one to become the many if you want to manifest, okay, everything that is there within you. But it also creates a problem. That's the whole thing. This division is a superficial phenomenon of the lower planes. On the heights, there is only oneness. Division brings in incompleteness, fragmentation, and a diminution of everything. Next comes the secondary result of distortion and perversion. Ignorance fully covers the consciousness of all creatures. The human degraded condition results in ignorance, unconsciousness, suffering. Then another fact has to be noted. There is an attraction. This is very interesting, we have to admit, okay? If you are very sincere, we will admit. There is an attraction, attachment, a sanction to these limitations and gradations. Even when a part of our being rejects and refuses pain and evil, other parts of the being will then remain, okay? Other parts of the being will them to remain. Sorry, I'm reading wrong, okay? Other parts of our being. Mind, we say, okay, I don't want suffering. But there is something in the vital which is perverse and it wills them to remain and continue. This strange fact is due to the divine principle of consciousness, force and ananda, which makes manifestation possible because of its will and sanction. Okay? The divine himself has willed and sanctioned the limitation, and limitation is also ending up in perversion and adversity. Okay? Manifestation because of its will and sanction. Nothing can continue to exist or come into existence without the sanction and approval of the Purusha. Okay? The divine himself has permitted this imperfection to come. There is secret ananda in everything, and it gets distorted to distorted. But the limitation also introduces distortion about this one. Yeah. Okay. So this contrary turn brings in falsehood. The fall from the divine has now produced the undivine. So there are many phenomena which we have to take into consideration. There is, first of all, the one becomes the many, and that's a willed many. Then there is a limitation. But the limitation also is one thing, but not only limitation, but perversity and distortion is there. Okay? Just like if you put a stick in water, okay, between the air and the stick seems to be bent. There is a distortion, but this distortion is apparent. Okay, so this is one thing. Now he is saying that if you look into the human nature, you will see that he doesn't want to change. This is something very interesting. Okay, and that also is very interesting. We have to see why there should be no change. Okay, people are. Sometimes you can see that in depression. When people are depressed and you want to bring them out of the depression, they don't want to come out. They enjoy the depression. There is something in us which enjoys you remember in Savitri the line, man is in love with his own ignorance and imperfection. He doesn't want to change. It may sound very funny, but if you look into yourself, you will see that. You are attached to your own habits. You are very comfortable in your comfort zone. You don't want to change anything because change means a disturbance and that makes a little problem. So that's the thing. So we have gone far beyond our time. It's already nearing 8:40. So we stop here today. Next time we'll look at detail this one. But the basic idea is clear. Right? It is not only a limitation but also perversity and distortion. And that brings in falsehood. And there is another thing which you have to know. Human beings are in love with this distortion. They don't want to change. So that's the thing. So we note that we have to do this para, redo the para. Beginning from, it is not possible.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay, au revoir everybody.
Thank you, Rangada.
Okay, au revoir everybody.